Hi, friends, and welcome to Life Intended, the podcast for women on a journey to take ownership of their own lives.
We're your hosts, Kelly Berry and Sadie Wackett, leaders, coaches, friends, and women on our own journeys of self-leadership.
Here, we don't believe women need to be fixed.
We believe they need to stop seeking permission and start leading lives that they choose and they design.
Life Intended is about unlearning truths that have been handed to us and start trusting your truth and living in alignment with what matters most.
Each week, we're bringing you bold, honest conversations that challenge the stories holding you back, help you uncover and step into your own voice, your own purpose, and your own power.
From inspirational guest interviews to unfiltered chats between the two of us, you'll leave every episode with insights, tools, and the kind of encouragement that sticks.
This is your space to wake up, break free, and lead the life you were always meant to live. Let's get into it.
Today, I have an incredible guest. I'm so excited to introduce Jessica Adams. Jessica is the founder of Discover Yellow, a platform dedicated to helping women create the margin they need to live with greater intention, build meaningful connections, and refuel in ways that truly matter. With nearly 20 years of experience in the personal development world, she launched Discover Yellow to guide women in breaking free from the hustle, reflecting on their journey, and aligning their lives with what truly matters most to them. Through workshops, retreats, and organizational partnerships focused on team and leadership development, Jessica empowers people to cultivate self-awareness, invest in themselves, and foster deeper connections. Her passion for people shines through in her work as she loves nothing more than witnessing others light up when they do the work to show up as their best selves. Jessica is also a wife to James, mom to two wonderful kids, Perry and Pax, and a believer in experiences over gifts. She enjoys staying active, serving at her church, and embracing the simple joys that life has to offer. At Discover Yellow, Jessica fosters a space for deep work, fun, and meaningful connections, helping others live with intention and savor every moment along the way. Welcome, Jessica. So great to have you. I feel like just reading your bio, we have so much alignment in what is important to us and what we like to get out of others. So this is going to be a really fun conversation.
I could not agree more, Kelly. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's funny because when you were doing the intro of the podcast, I just had this immediate connection. And even when we've had some initial conversations, just there really is so much alignment and so much passion behind what it looks like to live a life well-intended, to live a life where you are making choices with a real understanding of how that serves you and how that allows you to serve others. So I'm very excited for today.
Yeah, me too. So one thing I want to give you a little time to talk about, it's actually kind of two parts, is tell us more about Discover Yellow and your kind of journey through your professional career to get to that. And then I know recently you celebrated, it was 3 years, correct?
3 years of naming Discover Yellow. Yep.
Okay. Well, that's what I want to talk about is the name and how you came to that. Just tell us a little bit more about what that's looked like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll kind of start with maybe just where the journey has gone over these last 20 years. It's almost hard to believe. I think we get to these points of our career and we can say, we're standing on 20 years of experience and yet feel like, how could we possibly, be here 20 years later? But the reality is when I look back over the majority of my career, and this is even prior to graduating college and going back to grad school and really getting into my professional career, all of the jobs that I have had the privilege really, or that I've selected to have, all have one common denominator. And it's interesting over time to kind of realize these threads that have been woven throughout your journey. And when it comes to work, the basis of all of it has all been based around people, helping and serving others. And that's probably both from a career standpoint, as well as I do just genuinely love hosting and helping and serving when it comes to giving back. But there is this thread throughout, which has always been people related. So majority of my career has been spent internal in an organization, working all things leadership development from, performance management, succession management, career coaching, assessments, leadership development, the whole gamut of pouring into people. And I often say people are my jam. I genuinely love nothing more than having the opportunity to come alongside someone in what their development journey looks like. seeing people really light up when they start to recognize their strengths and how those strengths can really not only enable them to do the work they're doing better, but with more passion, more connection, more why behind it is really just a beautiful thing to see. And the reality is that we spend a lot of our waking hours doing the work that we get to do, right? Whether that's chosen work of working outside the home and in a professional career, whether you're, a mama and you're working in your home and taking care of your family and your kids, or you're doing a little bit of a combination of both. There are majority of our waking hours, right, that are done wearing these multiple hats, that are done working. And I just have a huge, I guess, relatability, maybe a huge sensitivity to what that looks like, especially as a woman, as a working mom. I only know what it looks like to raise my family being a working mom. And I thankfully have a husband who is, a great team player in the process. But at the end of the day, I'm still the mom. And so we can all probably relate if you're in those shoes of just the number of hats that you do wear. And so when my professional career took a bit of a shift through by way of acquisition, the company that I worked for just over 16 years, I was faced with that lovely decision of what do you do next? And I had really had it on my heart and a passion for starting something on my own for a few years prior to this transition. But all that being said, about 3 years ago is when I made the decision to start Discover Yellow. So yes, 3 years ago was the naming of what is now called Discover Yellow. The original idea, if you will, and the real passion was to help women create space. And when I really started to unpack what that looked like and to gift people this idea of space, it really became clear to me that the use of space, the gift, if you will, of a bit of margin in our day is something that we should recognize as a gift. And I believe that when we know how to use time well, because we are all only getting the same 24 hours in a day, but when we know how to use time well and to refuel and be purposeful for us, it can be very meaningful. Even 5 minutes, if we know how to use it well, can be really meaningful. So it started me down a path of what could this really look like to gift people space? And through that process, the concept came of where in your day are you kind of going in and about your day and you have a bit of pause. You have kind of that natural, reflective moment of I have a choice to make. And in a conversation with my sister, who is super creative, she's oftentimes my think tank. So I'll give her a little plug on the help here. But we started talking about as you go throughout your day, and if you're driving and you go through a traffic light, red tells you to stop, green tells you to go, and yellow tells you to pause. It tells you to think. And it prompts that, that concept of, I have a choice to make. And so yellow started becoming something where it was like, oh my gosh, I could see this. I could see the reflective moment of the traffic light concept for anyone who's driving. You're seeing this on repeat, and it gives you that visual reminder. But I'm a very action-oriented person, and I love the ability to continuously learn. I think, life is a journey. And if we choose to look through a lens of being curious, we always have something to learn. Even in the hardest times, we have something to learn. And we have people along the journey that can help us learn. And so Discover became the front end of Yellow at that point of creating that space, creating that margin. Discover became a word that for me, I just really resonated with in the opportunity to see life through a lens of curiosity. And so everything behind the brand is about constantly learning more, being curious. We are dynamic human individuals that are constantly changing. Our circumstances, our environments are changing. And I think we owe it to ourselves to ask ourselves really good questions and allow ourselves that space to learn more along the way. So that's the Discover and that's the Yellow.
Yeah, that's great. So for all of us, myself included, who, when we see yellow on a traffic light, think speed up. Now we're going to stop and think pause to make a decision. It's a much healthier and safer way to look at that, to be honest. But I love that. I know that you, I know it was a very thoughtful naming process. And I think that there is so much to be said about reflection in general. We could probably talk about that all day long, but the ability to see and use these pauses to both like almost embody our experiences and then transition those into, what do we do now? And whether it's momentum or further pause or whatever that is, I think that that's really awesome.
just going to say, if I could really quick, even when you say momentum. So, the concept of using the traffic light, the yellow is a space to decide. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to stop. It might mean that the momentum is you're going forward. I mean, we have to make those safe decisions too. But I think relating that back to where we're going and what journey we're on, just in general, everyday living, it could be the same, right? Is there something right now that I need to actually pick up momentum on? Maybe I'm stuck and I'm actually supposed to be moving forward a bit. And maybe my inner critic is a bit loud, but the momentum is what I need. The push through that yellow is what I need to get through. But the opposite could be true too, where actually maybe I've just really been foot on the gas pedal a little too heavy, and the pull back and the pause is really the reflective time that I need. So I think yellow doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to stop at that light. It could mean that you are going through, and that right there is the decision. So, but it's being aware. I think it's that self-awareness in it that's key. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So let's talk about what you do and, creating this margin. I guess tell me a little bit more about why you believe that's so important and kind of like how you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, just as a caveat, that there is no one size fits all in anything that I'm about to say. And I do not have any of this figured out where, I'm going to do, like, people are going to do what Jessica does. Please don't. What I would say in that is, I often say that I really do believe that God has put Discover Yellow so close on my heart because I need it the most. I truly, truly believe that. I can be a person who can pack a pretty full schedule. And what I have realized over time of just doing more research and actually just more application of these small bits of margin and time for that reflective self-care throughout my day and week and month is that every little bit adds up. And as I said earlier, time is really a gift, and it is given to us all in the same allotment. It's how we choose to use it, how we choose to invest in it versus just spend it, that becomes the real ticket to finding these places of margin. And if you actually were on the Discover Yellow website, so if anyone goes out there, what you would notice is that there's a key word that I use right on the front landing page of the website, which is helping people to, yes, create margin, to live with greater awareness, intention, gratitude, and connection. But the key word that's before all of that is in the everydays. Because sure, at Discover Yellow, I do host long weekend retreats and workshops, and we have that time to really remove distractions and be in a focused place to do some of this reflective work. But the reality is that's not our everyday. And so the more that Discover Yellow has evolved, I've realized that the real beauty is tapping into what does it look like to create margin in the everydays? What does it look like to take the 5 minutes that you have, from point A to point B, or a transition from one meeting to another, or one task to another, and use that transition time well? What does it look like of when I'm doing a certain activity to actually use that as a time for some reflective thinking, or to ask myself a question of, if I say yes to this, where is that going to take me? I tell my kids often, chase your choices. And I need to tell myself the same thing. Saying yes to too many things is not realistic for me. And yet I'm a yes person. I'm a helper by nature. So recognizing more about yourself in that process can be so, so impactful. But margin itself, I'm a fairly simple person when it comes to things that I tend to connect to, right? Because then they're easier to remember. And for me, they're less of a, oh my gosh, that looks so hard to execute. So I like things that can get woven in and throughout my everydays. They don't feel like I have to totally pivot and stop doing so many things to just do one thing. So margin in the everydays for me looks like natural transitions. It looks like pauses between one activity to another. It looks like recognizing when I'm going to do a certain activity, how I might do that through the lens of self-care. I'm going to use this as probably a really simple example and silly for some, but I have about 2.5 minutes from my house to pick my son up at school. It's here in the neighborhood, which is a huge blessing. And I was finding myself, and this is a few years ago, but I was finding myself that going to pick up, just literally finishing my work day, sometimes being on a conference call all the way up until the point that he got in the car, was not serving how I was welcoming him into the car. It wasn't good for either of us. That transition time was just completely lost. And it's not perfect. It's not every day. But what I have become more mindful of is how that 2.5 minutes is margin. It really is. The commute from my house to pick him up at school is margin. And it can be used in ways that I might need in that moment to refuel. And that can look like a variety of things. Sometimes it's windows down with some fresh air. Sometimes it's no sound at all because it's been a, talking day. It's been a lot of noise and I just want it to be quiet before I know the evening activities are picking up. Sometimes it's my favorite song. It's like, turn the music up. I want a little encouragement or pump up, and this is happening. Sometimes it's calling my sister and just saying, I've got just a couple minutes, but how's your day? I want to check in. So it's just thinking about how you're utilizing these moments in and throughout your day. I have the same thing in the evening. I'm usually the last person up. We have an upstairs. So I'm usually the last person upstairs. But what I know is that if I stand at the bottom of my steps before I walk up and pause for even just 30 seconds, kind of recalibrate. Sometimes I'm reflecting on my day. Sometimes I'm saying a prayer. Sometimes it just depends. But the transition then upstairs, which is like 15 steps, it's not a lot of steps, but the transition upstairs to then be what I need to be doing in my evening, how I'm showing up for my family in that time can be different. It can be so different. So it's really looking for these opportunities of, I see margin as nothing more than a transition, a bit of breath, something that grabs your attention in small doses that allows you to maybe recalibrate so that when you go into the next activity, when you go into the next conversation, you can be more intentional, you can be more present. Maybe you're having to make a decision and you can make a better decision. I think margin really does allow you the opportunity to do all those things through a better lens and a much less depleted or fatigued lens.
Yeah. One thing that I really love about what you were talking about there is how to apply to the everyday. I had a guest on, it's been several months ago now, but talking about like living your ideal day and how truly like your ideal day should be your everyday, because that is what makes up your life. The retreats are great, the trips are great, birthdays, holidays, all of those things are great, but that's not living the life that you want to live. And so I like that this is really taking more control over your personal environment and your personal headspace, really. And those little things are the things that add up and make you have a more peaceful life, a more intentional life, a more, you can show up the way that you want. So I really like all of that and finding that space really in the ordinary things. I have a similar type of thing. It takes me a little bit longer, but I walk my daughter to school in the mornings. And so getting a toddler ready for school is a event, really. And I applaud everyone on this planet who has more than one child, because I only have one toddler. I don't know how I would do this with multiple, but by the time I'm like putting her in her stroller and we're walking to school, I'm like, then it's like getting her out of the stroller and getting her walked in school is a whole nother event. So I love the walk home as a transition from my morning that I've had with her to my day and like getting that started. So I've really started to use that. I used to like pop in a podcast or make a phone call or something, but I guess probably in a similar way that you found that like, showing up to the door of your son's school, like fully loaded from a conference call isn't necessarily the way you want to show up. I'm like, maybe I need to take this time for myself to like mentally review my schedule for the day or think about whatever it is. I've really noticed that that's made a difference in like, then how I come into the house, how I like get myself ready, sit down at my desk and like start going. So I think, one of the things that maybe it's just a realization that people need to have is like all of these moments, they belong to us. And so we need to decide how we're going to use it. And a lot of times we're so used to just giving them all away. That just taking a little bit more ownership over those. So
Yeah. That kind of adage of, are you allowing your schedule to choose you, or are you choosing, because there are a lot of things, let's be honest, we can't choose how we spend every bit of every day. But I think if we're honest, we can probably choose more than we think. And, whether it be we have, sort of certain coping mechanisms that we fall into, or the fact that we live in a world that's just filled with distractions, whether it's watch notifications, emails pinging, the lovely cell phone, like even thinking about these times where, we just, for nothing else, do a moment of check-in. Like, so for my car example, for for that, to kind of play that out a little bit more, there are times where I will get in my car and I will literally put my hands on the wheel and say, what do I need? Because sometimes we don't really know, but let me tell you, when you start asking, it becomes really clear. Your body is smart. It will tell you what it needs. Just that refuel, even mentally, to transition to some of these activities. Our days are full. We are wearing a lot of hats, regardless of what season of life you're in, regardless of what role you're in. I think just by nature, our world, our culture can to some degree reward the busy. It can be almost a little bit of a badge of honor sometimes, of saying I've got a lot going on. And again, I will say, admittedly, I am a person who can pack a pretty full schedule. But what I realize is that I also need to know limits. I need to recognize, when am I having these peaks and lulls in my day, that I can use things for my advantage so that I don't literally go through my day and just fall into bed at night. And does that still happen sometimes? It absolutely does. We're human. But one thing I was saying actually at a recent retreat, and several people reacted to, and I share this very vulnerably, is I had a real recognition at one point several years back before I had started Discover Yellow. And I think part of my awareness and real heart and passion has really stirred from this, which was the people who I love the most, who are the folks that are living in my home, were literally getting the leftover of me. Like, I could almost get emotional saying that, because if someone asked me who your priorities are, I would always say my family. And that was true. But the way that I was depleting myself along the way throughout the day, they weren't getting the best of me. And again, I say that just very vulnerably because I don't know if anyone else recognizes or relates to that as well. I had one gal actually at a recent retreat when I was reading feedback that brought me to tears, because that comment helped her make some decisions around what she was going to say no to be able to create more white space, to create more intentional time with her family.
Yeah.
And she said that leaving the retreat just a week after, she had said no to more things in 1 week than she had in 6 months. And it allowed for a pretty awesome day to happen. Now, are we always going to be in a position to be able to do that? Again, we're not. But that's why I think these small moments of margin are even more impactful, because they are the little things. You almost think of them almost like deposits in your bank account, right? Just deposits in your energy. And they are the little things that over time you get to then pull from after you've made those deposits.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty special.
Yeah. I think that awareness of that goes a long way. I would say that, that's a value that you have, that your family is the most important thing to you. And it's probably a value that most of us have. And when we are living in ways that are not in alignment with that, we feel it, and the people that are important to us are feeling it also. So becoming aware of how you're showing up, and, when you aren't, when you're irritable and you don't want to be, or you're tired all the time, or, you're saying yes to things that you don't really want to do, that is causing you to have to say no to things that you really want to do. Like, I would say all of those are probably signs that you are running yourself on empty and leaving the leftovers for everybody else. So
yeah, absolutely. It's kind of that, that adage of like, you can't pour from an empty cup. Put your oxygen mask on first. I mean, all those things they're so true. And yet I think we could probably tell ourselves individually a variety of different stories that we don't always act in that way. And even if we're not at a place of complete, depletion, or, maybe we still have a fair amount of energy to give, likely, we have to think about what's sustainable, right? We can't give something that we don't have, not in a sustainable and an authentic fashion. And I think that's the piece that has always really resonated with me in getting to do this work, is to really, you mentioned values, having people really understand their values, having people, really think about what do they want to be intentional in this season of their life? What's important? Why is it important? And then really kind of chasing that forward of, is that, like, if someone looked at my calendar, right? Is that what's showing up as the important pieces? Am I making space for those things? And again, they're going to change. So I think this type of work is constant. Actually, if you took a look at the Discover Yellow logo, there is a circular kind of image of a bunch of dots that kind of resides behind the Discover Yellow. And that was created because of the journey, of life, of the constant, learning. And the variety of dots all sync back to the community element of, we weren't designed to do this life alone. So being in a place where we get to learn from others, where we get to pour into others, And to know that we're all coming from a different place and we're all at different points of our journey is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're talking with someone about this and they're probably, they've got all these symptoms of being overwhelmed and they're probably like, but I don't have any margin, or I don't have any time, or I want to do all these things, but I can't figure out what to do. How do you help them kind of audit and figure that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is where I think getting to do this work and coming alongside people in this journey is probably, it's one of the biggest gifts for me. I really consider it a privilege when someone is choosing to share their time and their heart with me. And certainly if there's a monetary element, if it's a workshop or retreat, I don't take that lightly, because I think it's really easy to be in a pattern of kind of believing that things are serving you, or just doing things because it's what you've always done, or maybe it's because how you were raised. Without those elements of check-in along the way, you just do what you know to do, right? And so a couple of things come to mind immediately, and this really happens a lot in our workshops and at workshops that are happening at retreats, but having people check in on their own expectations is really huge. Because I do believe that when we are unaware of what expectations we're bringing into our everydays, into a certain circumstance, we could really, really be missing the fact that we have set an expectation for ourselves that, one, may not be realistic, and two, may not even be our own expectation. The other thing that usually people recognize when we do the expectation workshop is it's very easy when we have expectations of ourselves, whether we know them or we don't. It's very easy to project that onto others and to think that everyone thinks like us, or they should do things like us, right? And so I don't know if you can relate to this, but sometimes when people aren't doing the things the way we would want them to do or whatever, we kind of just pick it up ourselves and we just run with it. And so we take another thing on. So that leads me to kind of the second piece, which is also the element of where in our days do we have the ability to ask for help, and really, really thinking about. And this, for me, I will tell you, does not come natural. I know some people who are definitely better at this. It is a learned thing over time, and one that even over the last year has been a huge gift in realizing that asking for help is not a burden. You're not necessarily putting a burden on someone. They have the ability to say no, and yet it can, in a very beautiful way, create extra space, extra energy for you. And it can actually give someone else purpose and allow them to use their strengths and give something back to you. And I don't know why it took me so long to learn this, because I am a helper, right? If someone asks me, I'm usually trying to figure out ways to help them. And yet when it came to myself, I really struggled with that. And I think it probably comes back to a little bit of my own pride, which isn't great to admit, vulnerability, feeling like, oh, if I ask for help, I can't do it, sensitivity there. But the reality is when we ask for help, we open the opportunity for more energy, for more margin, to be able to give in different ways. And some of the things that we take on aren't ours to take. So it can be a real gift to allow others to do that. Those are kind of the two big things. The other thing I would say, which would kind of round it out, is to really, really think about what's getting your yeses. Oftentimes I will kind of say to people, sometimes you need a purposeful no so you can make more room for a purposeful yes. Because at the end of the day, we are human. We are only one person. And even when we're running around and we're doing all of the things and we're getting things done, I think if we took a really stepped up, above all the situations, and if we looked down on everything, we likely would have some things to learn along the way that might tell us that all those yeses are not really the best for us, in the way that are aligning with our values, where we want to be spending our time, how we're refueling and taking care of ourselves. And again, maybe in the short term, we're going to have seasons where those are just happening. But we need to be thinking about the longevity in the long term too, just like we invest in our physical health, and we're going to the gym and we're making healthy decisions on what we put into our body from a nutrition standpoint. We need to also be thinking about our energy, our mental capacity for those things, how we're refueling in those ways. And of course, nutrition and exercise and movement can all build into that as well. But sometimes it's not about all those things either. Sometimes it is about just recognizing, what do I have to learn in this situation? Do I have too high of expectations? Do I need to ask for help? Could I ask for help? What would it look like? Am I creating, opportunities for this refuel in and throughout my day? Hopefully that kind of helps a little bit in terms of where people might maybe take or resonate with one of those things, and realize that actually by doing some of those things, we might have those opportunities for a bit more margin or to be exhausting some energy in different ways.
Yeah. So I want to dig into the expectation one a little bit more, because it makes a lot of sense when you're talking about it, but it isn't one that I think I would have naturally thought about. But I can see how that would be, there's a huge almost like disparity there. It's like, I don't have time to do anything, but I have to do everything to the best level ever, So talk about, like, what does that actually look like? How do people who have high expectations and want things done to a certain level, how do we either back off or adjust? What are our options there?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I don't know that there's probably no secret sauce, no magic
Yeah.
wand to any of it. I tell people that a lot when it comes to development of, if it were that easy, just here we go, we're done.
Mhm.
But I think that's where the awareness comes in. Honestly, I would say at the core of everything that I've talked about really is continuing to ask why. So high expectations, I could fall into that category. High achiever, absolutely. I completely relate to that. But I think the reality is also asking yourself, why am I wanting to do it that way? Why does it need to be done that way? Maybe there's something I've seen. Maybe there's something I've listened to. It could be even like a podcast or something like that. I've listened to something and I hear someone talk about something, and all of a sudden I've absorbed that without even realizing if I need to, right? So I think it's just becoming curious of what is really driving your motivations, your expectations, your choices, all of those things. And again, I'm talking about this at a big level. Even starting with one small thing in your day can make a huge impact. It can make a huge impact. I feel like my kids are in a ton of my examples. They just naturally are. But I will use just this as an example. So, my daughter, she switched dance studios actually this year. As she dances competitively, she's at a new dance studio. We made the decision, and it's a wonderful studio, but it is a longer commute. And so part of our decision making in allowing her to move to this new studio was thinking about how realistically we were going to get her to and from the studio. It's about a 35 to 40-minute drive each way. So to me, it was a big decision because I typically am the carpool, shuffle. That's one of the hats I wear. And anyway, in the grand scheme of it, what really came down to part of the decision was my willingness to ask for help based on an expectation that I had set for myself that I wore the hat of the carpool person. And also what I realized in my own just reflection time is I recognize that time in the car with my kids right now, they're 10 and 12. I almost said 9, but my 9-year-old just turned 10 and 12. Time in the car with them is precious. So I had an expectation that I had sort of started to create a narrative really around car time and how important it was to me. I tend to be quality time is my love language. Mm-hmm. And that's how I was getting little bits of those doses. And so all of that started to form an awareness for me in why this commute felt like a big deal and it was going to stretch me in certain ways, and why it was going to be so tricky and so hard for me to ask for help, because I really saw it more of what I was letting go of and what I was not getting versus what I could be gifting, right? And using it in creative ways too. So all that to be said, that wasn't just one question that got me there. That was me sitting with it for a bit of time. But the beautiful piece of it is asking for help, realizing it was totally fine to ask for help, realizing I'm still part of the carpool process and the doses that I get of the carpool are still opportunities to have conversations with my kids. And when I asked another mom for help, she actually needed help too. And we needed almost the opposite. So while I needed afternoon, she needed evening help. And it was sort of this puzzle piece that came together. Like, why have we not considered this in this scenario? And I know, again, I feel like this might seem small, but in the grand scheme, this could add up to probably 4 hours a week with the commute. 4 hours.
Yeah. Not
in the car. My child is in a trusted place with someone who I trust. And I now have 4 hours that I get a better choice of how to use that time.
Yeah. and she gets to dance where she wants to dance.
And she gets to dance and she's thriving.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. So this is kind of, I mean, it's very much along the same lines, but it's something that I heard. I don't even know where I heard somebody talking about it recently, but I think it's worth mentioning here. And I think it's worth mentioning because I am a person who I have a very hard time asking for help in any way, shape, or form. And a lot of it, you know, I'd have to like really sit with it, but it's probably a lot of pride, I like to do things my way. If everybody listening to this who knows me is probably nodding their heads, you know, I'm very specific. And the third is like, I don't want anyone to owe, or I don't want to owe anyone anything. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know, there's probably a lot of crossover there. But I was listening to this person and they're talking about like how, you know, we're humans designed to live in these communities where we all, you know, jump in and support each other. And the gig economy has kind of started to transition the way that we think about this, because we no longer think about that it's acceptable to ask our neighbor for a cup of sugar. We go on Instacart and order it and pay somebody to deliver it. We no longer think it's acceptable to give our used furniture to the people down the street or whatever. We get on Facebook Marketplace and we sell it. You know, and there's all of these things. TaskRabbit, you hire somebody to come over and like hang your pictures. So we're no longer looking for the people living next to us or in our communities to help us out. We're looking, who can we outsource this to or pay for it? And I do think that that's really like altered the way that we live or don't live in this like community of people who really are the village that's helping us live. And so I just think that that's kind of interesting because, I mean, I have an app for everything and I'm ordering and paying and everything all the time. And sometimes I stop and I think, you know, like, would I have like deeper community roots and deeper community relationships, which is something else that I want to work on if I would take the leap and ask for help, or like you're talking about, even see like, how can we help each other? So that's definitely something that's like top of mind, but maybe something good for other people to think about too, as they're like utilizing all of these like services that keep popping up. You know, maybe we should stop paying strangers to do things that we used to ask our friends to do, you know, for no cost. Anyway, I like that. Those are kind of some unexpected things that you said about creating margin, but I do think it's, I can see how those are difference makers, especially in like, you know, I know your example just gave you 4 hours, but even some of those that only give you a few minutes, you know, it's key to be able to create those. And then it's really key to be able to figure out how to use them.
Right.
So what's your advice or strategy on, okay, you're creating these spaces. Now, what do you do with them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, again, I would come back to the self-awareness. Ask yourself, right? Almost imagine that someone's even asked you, you have 2 hours back in your week. How are you going to use it? Answer that question. Sometimes I tell people, start just putting pen to paper. I'm not a huge journaler, but I am a list maker. So I often approach my journaling as, and people laugh at that when I say that, because they're like, you bring people in these workshops and you ask us to reflect and write. But I will always caveat, if journaling is not your thing, use the time and reflection in ways that do serve you well. That could look like journaling and maybe more paragraph style. It could look like lists or bullet points. You could be visual where you want to actually draw something. It could be quiet. It could be time spent in prayer. It is your choice how you use that time. But I would say, just as you would think about asking someone else that question, you owe it to yourself of what does that look like. And you also owe it to yourself to allow things to be dynamic and shift over time. So the way that you maybe are using, you know, the 4 hours one week may not necessarily be the way you use them the next week. Sometimes when we get a little bit of extra margin, we want to fill it. There's maybe I've got more purpose if I fill it, or, you know, I've been wanting to say yes to this. And maybe we should. Maybe there are times where that is the case, but probably not every time. So I think also just being mindful of when you have these extra moments to really take a hard look at, if I have this time, this gift that's really been given to me, how can I use it well? Is there something maybe I've been wanting to work on? Is there time that actually that becomes mine? And I see that now as a bit of a gift, right? Where instead of feeling like I can't catch up on something, I'm going to use those 4 hours to make sure that, come Friday, I can be a place of laundry and other things are caught up, or, whatever that might be. Or maybe I've been looking to try to have some time getting together with friends, and maybe one of those hours works. So I'm going to be good about putting an hour, on the calendar and having a social hour with some friends, whatever that might look like. But I think what I would say is ask yourself the question. If it's a hard question to answer, I think that means it's a good question. I love the power of a question. And if you're struggling a little bit, think about someone else asking you the question. Because usually if someone catches us a little off and we're not sitting there thinking, how do I need to respond to this? We can be a little more free flowing. Take a walk, get some movement. Movement sometimes helps with the creativity and really getting things going. But at the end of the day, I would say, ask yourself the question, how can I use this time? How can I steward it well? I've been given time. There is actually a book called 4,000. I'm just going to plug here. I forget the author's name, but it is a wonderful book. And it talks about time management, not from the sake of creating this, time blocking and rigid schedule, but more from the sake of 4,000 weeks is actually the number of weeks if you live to the age of 80. And I don't know about you, but when I realized that, I thought 4,000 weeks doesn't sound like a lot of weeks. And so one of the things they talk about in the book is so many things we can use as the excuse when they don't get done. I didn't have time. And we can kind of keep adding things to a list. And the reality is sometimes when something doesn't get done, it's because we hit a little bit of a roadblock. Maybe it felt a little challenging to us, a little hard. Maybe there's good reason and it's not, something we need to be doing right now. But we can sometimes get ourselves a little stuck on the things that we say are important to us. And we might need to recalibrate and say, is it still important? If so, am I telling myself a narrative? Is the inner critic just a little bit loud? And if I really realistically do have the time, I need to put my money where my mouth is. I need to actually put some things on the calendar and start moving forward with some of these bigger things that maybe I'm putting off just because I've hit a little bit of a roadblock or something all of a sudden feels a little more challenging. And now I fill my time with other things. And so at the end of the day, I have the feeling of accomplishing a lot, but I still have that heavy weight of those big things that I'm not moving forward with.
Yeah. Yeah. Which leads me, or maybe just I'm thinking about this, I want your opinion on it. So you probably talk to a lot of people who say they're busy, they don't have time, but they're doing a lot of things in their life that are busy or activities or, very, to your point that you just said, like they have these big things that they want to be doing. They're not doing them, but they have these other things on their calendar that they're filling their time with, like we'll say watching a lot of TV or keeping up with 10 series or whatever it is. And so what they're saying and what they are doing aren't in alignment. How do you help people reconcile that? Because I think that there are a lot of people nowadays who are like, well, I need to rest. I need to that's my time to
Sure.
just veg out. Yeah. How do you help people reconcile what that looks like?
So I think, again, I would go back, everything is going back to self-awareness. That's not really intended, but it is a core. But I would say the reconciling for me comes with the recognition, because just like anything can become a bit of a coping mechanism and might serve us okay and well in small doses, I think we owe it to ourselves to really ask ourselves, how is it serving us in our week, in our month, in our day, whatever that looks like. And it kind of goes back to that chasing your choice and recognizing, if this is the choice I make, where is it taking me? I read a book one time where someone used the analogy of, we wouldn't likely jump in to a river not knowing the temperature, not knowing where it heads, if it's rocky on the bottom. Usually there's a little bit of a get your toe wet, put your foot in, test it out, look around the corner, all of those elements. And granted, we're not going to know all of the things, but what we can do is make a better choice on if we choose to step in that water. And so I think, again, all of the decisions, every one of us, and there are going to be days, there are going to be weeks, there are going to be seasons where you're just really into something and that's getting your time and attention. But I think if you're finding yourself where you're coming back to the thoughts of, I don't know why I don't have time for this, or, I keep hearing people talk about this and sounds great, but how do I make that work? Is just taking a little bit of a look at the choices you are making and how that's serving you. The
Mm-hmm.
choices that maybe you're making that, I actually just finished a corporate workshop just this morning, and we were talking a lot around self-care and the fact that we shouldn't be in a place where we're waiting until we're completely depleted to recognize that self-care is important, or to think that over time, if we know that sleep is important to us and we need a certain number of hours of sleep, or we want to have our mornings protected, so we want to wake up at this time and feel ready to go in our day, that over time, if we erode that it's not going to have an impact. And it usually is a bit of a domino impact. So all the good things we talked about around creating this margin and how we can show up well for the work that we're called to do and for others, all of that gets eroded over time when we're not refueling in these meaningful ways and thinking about, what we're putting in front of our eyes, what we're putting in our ears, what choices we're saying yes to, all of those things over time. So I would say long way to answer, but it comes back to the recognition. So again, paying attention to what are the things that you continue to come back to and chase it backwards a little bit, right? How did I get here? Because there's a lot of little things, sometimes big things, but a lot of little things that usually get us to a place, and we can just be in that forward momentum, that relentless motion forward, and just the, kind of being sucked into this cycle of being busy. And I am guilty of that. I can literally sometimes get to Friday and say, I can't believe it's Friday. And a lot of that is because I have literally not even checked in the entire week. I don't go most weeks like that anymore, but I'm definitely still human and capable of that. But typically I will try to do, in fact, actually, even on social media, I do a Wednesday take 5. And it's all this idea around this midweek, creating a cadence for check-in. And it's a reflective question, usually on a particular topic around increasing, self-awareness, but something that gives you a reason to pause. And that's actually something that I've enjoyed doing myself.
Yeah. Awesome. I'll have to look for that. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there anything else about margin and creating and how to spend it that you think is important that we haven't touched on yet?
Good question. I feel like we've covered a lot, to be honest. I think the one thing that maybe we haven't said yet that I would sort of leave in parting, and this is whether it's margin specific or self-care or refuel, but at its core is just very close to my heart. I read a quote. Actually, I'll kind of talk about 2 quotes because they resonate so much with this type of work and this type of opportunity to bring a greater sense of awareness. But the first one is about being mindful, being present, and kind of being where your feet are planted. And it simply says, wherever you are, be there totally. And what I would offer to you is, especially in busy times and busy seasons, and again, we are all going to be very different in what that looks like, but use that as an opportunity to check in. I'm here. Am I here totally? Because I don't know about you, but there are definitely times in and throughout my day, even with things that are important to me, people that are important to me, that I am physically present and my mind is a million miles away. Could be in the past, could be in the future, but it is not where my feet are planted. So even that, looking at that through a lens of margin, I think offers a huge gift. You have now created a better opportunity to connect with what you're doing, the work that you're doing, the people that you might be with, just by being present.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The other one is probably more in the form of self-care, but I think I talk with people a lot about the opportunity to reframe a situation. And I think in most situations, especially the ones that get a little tough and, are harder to find a little gratitude in, if you can allow yourself the opportunity to say, how could I reframe this situation? You have a much higher likelihood of learning something, I believe, in the process, and being able to look through a lens of gratitude of what the situation or the circumstance is bringing, right? Even in the hard. But a quote that I love that I think has a wonderful reframe and is very much tied to a bit of margin and definitely the self-care piece is, I knew I should have written this down because I read it a lot instead of actually just saying it, but it goes something to the effect of, instead of asking yourself, have I worked hard enough to deserve rest? Ask yourself, have I rested enough to do my most loving and meaningful work? And the reframe of a very similar question is incredibly powerful, especially if you're finding yourself or you're a person who is a high achiever, a go-getter, is setting those expectations pretty high for yourself or others, wearing a lot of hats, right? I think we can all fall into different seasons of life where one of those or all of those things can be very true. The reality is we need these moments of margin. We need these moments of refuel and refresh. We owe it to ourselves to know that if we have 5 minutes or 2.5 minutes on a car ride to school, there are ways that we can utilize that are beneficial for us. And so I think that would be it for me.
Yeah, that's all really good. I agree. I think reframing, and there's a lot to be said about that, but it's just taking control of your own narrative, really, and reshaping things for good instead of for bad, and for learning instead of for failing. There's just a lot there. So that's a
We could
really
have a whole nother
yes, we
podcast on
could.
that. I'd love that.
Yes, we could. Yeah, so I think that was a good way to wrap it up. Before we talk about how people can find you, I did have another totally separate question, but we are recording this. It's not going to come out until early 2025, but right now we're in December and it's like prime Christmas season. So you mentioned that you love experiences over gifts, and you also have a couple of young children. So how do you take that, what's important to you, and kind of apply that to your children, especially here we are at Christmas time? So
Yeah, that's a great
think that's
question.
something it would be good to hear from you on.
Yeah, I love that. I love that question. So what immediately comes to mind is we're now at the ages 10 and 12 where they want to contribute in ways, right? They have a bigger say in what we're doing. And, that sort of breaks my mama heart in just a little bit, only in the sense of there are certain traditions maybe where we would go do certain things. And now they're aging out of some of those things in certain ways. But from a reframe standpoint, how great is it that there are other things that maybe do get them excited? So actually, that's been a little bit more of this year, is asking them what they want to do and asking them to contribute to some of the ideas. That concept, if you will, actually came by way of having some conversations with people. It was stemming from expectations, but about vacations. And oftentimes, they can create this sense of big buildup. And the moment where, you have this big idea and this plan, and you've invested a lot of planning and you're here, and then one thing goes wrong and that's what you bucket as the whole vacation is that, right? And I think the holidays can kind of bring that same level of elevated expectations in a lot of ways. And they look different for everyone. Everyone has different levels of energy and excitement that they bring into it. And things that matter to me may not matter as much to my kids these days. Mm-hmm. So actually, that's kind of where we've gone this holiday season, is seeing what they're excited about and asking them, hey, I'm going to the store. Do you want me to get stuff to make cookies? Or do you guys want to do gingerbread houses this year? And not taking it like big offensive if they say no, they don't. Mm-hmm. Or realizing that, there might be a movie that we typically watch, and this year it might be looking a little different. So I think for me personally, that's just been a bit of my own learning, but also has really played out nicely in some of the things that we've already gotten to do. And we're actually traveling home to Ohio this year, which is where all of our family is. And so we're just excited to always be with them. But this will definitely be, a great opportunity to have more of those experiences and make lots of memories. So
yeah. Always good to bring expectations. That's how I think I've felt my whole entire life about New Year's Eve. Like there's so many expectations and it's never really all that great. Yeah. So
totally.
Also, in expectations, we went to a Christmas parade this weekend with my daughter, and it's just like things did not go as planned, and it was just not that fun. I think like reflecting upon that, I could see all the signs that were like, this is not going to be the best idea. But I had this like, we're going to do the holiday things, and this is going to be fun, and none of us had a very good time. So
yeah. Yes, totally. And that's the power and the beauty of reflection, right? I actually just facilitated, I do a holiday workshop each year and kind of middle towards end of November. And it's really just been a very sweet time for women to come and to have that bit of a check-in, to even recognize what they're bringing into the holiday season, because that can very much dictate, where our head's at, what our thoughts are, how that might be triggering some emotions, because the holidays are so different for everyone. But then also just getting clear on where they want to be intentional in a busy season. Because again, I think having a little bit of an eye on the compass of where you're heading, then you have a greater opportunity. It doesn't mean you're going to get it all right, but you have a greater opportunity of recognizing the things that you're going to give your attention to, the things that you know in a busy time. These are the things that you still want to make space for. They're still important to you. And I think that matters. It's kind of staying true to those commitments maybe that you've made to yourself and having the confidence of knowing that you can do that even in a busy time.
Yeah.
And also giving yourself grace. I love to have people write a letter. So that's just maybe a takeaway of thinking about when you're in a busy season, and especially around the holidays, but writing yourself a letter that you can open into the new year and give yourself grace in the process, knowing that it's not about perfection. It truly is about the learning and the reflection along the way. And just knowing that honestly, even if there's one thing that you choose to do a little bit different and it has a great impact, celebrate that one thing. It matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great way to end that. So tell us how can people find you? And, I know you mentioned like retreats and workshops and everything, but anything on the horizon that you have coming up that you'd like to talk about, I'd love for you to tell people about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So biggest presence is going to be on Instagram. So it's just at discover.yellow. Variety of, up and coming events out there. And as I mentioned, pretty much every Wednesday, I'm pretty regular, but there will be what's called the Take 5. And that's really just an opportunity to take that midweek reflection with a thought-provoking question and to gift yourself, even if you have 5 minutes. You never know what you're going to learn by just sitting in 5 minutes with a question. So that Instagram is probably the best way to stay connected. I do have Facebook as well. So usually when I post, it'll kind of cross over there. LinkedIn, I am out there as Jessica Adams. I think I do have a Discover Yellow page, but I'm not as active out there. And certainly you can go to the website, which is just discoveryellow.com, and that'll have a variety of learning more, obviously, about this journey and this journey of self-discovery and creating margin. But it has a great representation of a lot of our retreats over the past 3 years and just seeing more of testimonials. So you can, really get a sense for what to expect and what you would experience at a retreat. I don't actually have my 2025 plans announced yet. But hopefully by the time you launch this, I would have those things out. And I would just say, stay connected on Instagram. Everything will get promoted up.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll make sure the show notes reflect any actual concrete plans.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
People know about those. So, well, thank you so much. This is great. And I think so, like anyone really listening can take something from it and apply it and create a little bit more margin and a little bit just more peace and intention for their day, which is extremely important. So
yeah, that's great. That is always my hope. So thank you all for listening. And I appreciate you, Kelly, for having me on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Life Intended.
If something from this episode landed with you, stirred something up, or gave you a new perspective, share it, tag us, leave a review. That's how this work reaches more women who really need it.
Life Intended is more than just a podcast. It's a movement back to self-trust, personal power, and living with intention.
We're just getting started.
So keep showing up, keep tuning in. If you're ready for more support on your path, head to lifeintended.co. We've got tools, community, and programs to meet you where you are. Until next time.